Okay, record. Can you see my desktop? Yes.
Yes, it is
Yeah.
visible.
Okay. So I prepared just some slide set, and we will do the work directly in the terminal. So here, welcome everybody. So the idea is to learn how to run some ONAP test written by the integration team. So just as you know, we have CI/CD change that we run several times per day. So we have daily change, we have weekly change, we have gating change, so lots of change. And for during this change, we are installing ONAP and we are running some tests. So here I just put a screenshot, but you can see that in live. If I do not filter, yeah, you can see that at the moment there are one gating running on Azure 2, one on Azure 3. So we can see all the things. So we have the Open Lab that is running also every day. And we will find, if we filter, we'll find the last Gulin stable run. Yeah, okay, it happens during the middle of the night. And we have all these steps. So we configure, we deploy the infrastructure, we deploy ONAP, and then we run the test. And the test, you can see that we have long list of tests. That usually that's part of the CI, so that's part of GitLab CI, and you can find this test in a dashboard. So that's exactly the same thing that we push uh, as a result in the dashboard on the LFIT backend. So, if, for example, for the daily, if we look at the daily of the day, the daily of February, so the 10th of February, it's here. So we have the results here, and we can click and find back all the tests we ran. So some tests here, some tests here, and if we click on the link, we have also the artifact of the test. So we run this test frequently, and we have, I say, for each pipeline a list of tests. So the integration team regularly for every release, we decide how we make some evolution in this pipeline. So we add some tests, we remove other, we move from one test from category to another, and we may also add some categories. That's how it works. So we have at the end this dashboard. So it's just another way to show the results, because when you are doing that with a GitLab CI pipeline, if you want to get the results, you need to click on the artifact. Here we just simplify by creating a dashboard in order to make all the test results clickable. And that's what we have at the end. And usually, so the idea was for a release that infrastructural check should have been at least 50%, because we know that for Gulin, for example, the use of M2 was preventing the M test to be run because SO was too slow, the M chart was too big. So we may adapt the figure we want as success criteria for the release. So we have so we'll detail the different category, but just to mention that all these tests can be run on your own app, and we try to adopt a single way to run the test in order to simplify the integration in the pipeline, assuming that all these tests are very different. Some are written in Python, some in Bash, some in Robot, some are generating HTML pages, some log files, some are generating just pushing the results in a database. So we have different use case, we have different framework, but at the end, they are all in this pipeline and they are all managed through this pipeline. So we have, for the moment, 4 categories. Infra health check. So infra health check is really, we do a snapshot of Kubernetes. That's all the tests that are dealing with Kubernetes. So we are just checking that the Helm chart have been deployed. We are checking that the Kubernetes cluster is in a good shape. So it's really all the tests we can do directly using Kubernetes. And we add also in this category all the tests of certificate expiration to check that the node port that are exposing HTTPS have a validate certificate. So that's this category dealing with infra. So the certificate could have been in security. That's kind of discussion we have regularly, but for the moment we put that in infra health check. Health check category is really what we are dealing with. That's a legacy use case. So the robot test you are used to run after an installation. So most of the robot tests are there, but we start to introduce also basic tests in Gulins. Healthcheck will be tests that will really focus on one component. So if you are checking, for example, just SDC, we can create a test in healthcheck that will just focus on SDC, even if it performs several operations. But if we are doing a test that will deal with lots of different components, so end-to-end tests that will require access to ANI, SDC, SDNC API, then we put that in smoke use case. So health checks are usually simpler because they are just focusing on one component, and smoke use cases are more complex and can be longer. So that's also a question of discussion. Some tests start in smoke use case and we move them to health check because we believe it was easy to understand this way. And the last category is the security. So typically we are checking that root pods, the pods are not run as roots, that we are checking the versions, we are checking the different that each pod has some limits. So that's the security test. And we run them at the very end. And in gating, we don't run the security tests. We run them only on weekly and on daily chain. And even for some security tests, we run them only in weekly because they are taking very lot of time. So it does not make sense to do that on a daily. For example, the security we have for the moment for checking the versions, they are taking quite a lot of time. So we run that only in weekly chain. So that's the different categories. And as I said, it can evolve, of course. And I hope for Honolulu, we will be able to create a benchmark category in order to run stability tests, not only at the very end of the release cycle, but during also the release cycle and run some tests. So for the demo, we will focus on 3 tests belonging to 3 different categories. So we'll run the ONAP Kubernetes test, which is a snapshot of the infrastructure. We run the test called full, corresponding to the robot full. So that's the health check category. And we will run the basic VM, which is a test that emulate the fact that you create a model in SDC, you distribute the model, then you instantiate through the SO a VM. So it's a basic Ubuntu, and you check on OpenStack that your VM has been created. There are other tests, especially for the basic. We have a basic CNF when you deploy a basic Helm chart. We have a basic onboard just dealing with SDC. We have basic CDS when we just enrich a CBA, we open a node port. So we start getting lots of different basic tests. The main difference between what we were doing in El Alto and what we are doing now since Frankfurt, but more on Gulin, we are now creating tests in order to test ONAP feature. We do not rely just on the use case, or very big use case, because initially the use case were used to validate ONAP. Now we decided to create smaller tests that will focus on some features. So for example, basic VM is running an instantiation a la carte. We have other tests that will do the same thing with macro mode. So we are really focusing on the main feature. We believe it's needed to verify at each occurrence of CI change to prove that the system is stable. As you can see, there are if you want to get the list of all the tests, you can go to docs.onap, and the documentation has been refactored. In Gulin, so we try to do something, I would say, more understandable at first stage. So we have a category for the test, and the test, we have different tests. We have the use cases, so we have a dedicated page for use cases. We have CIST tests, so that's functional tests that run in Gate in Jenkins, and we have the automatic test in end-to-end chain. So that's what I'm going to show today. And we can find back the different categories. For each test, you have the name, description. If you want to have access to the code, you can directly go to the code. As said, we are integrating lots of tests coming from lots of different places. So for example, the ONAP Kubernetes test, it's something coming from a dedicated project called check Kubernetes status. So that's an independent project done in gitlab.com. And if we run the full, that's a robot test, and the code is hosted in ONAP repo here. So in the documentation, we try all the time to indicate what kind of framework we are using, where is the code of the test. And for example, for basic VM, the last one we will show, the code is in ONAP repo, so in Python SDK test. So we have the test here, and it's based on the framework Python SDK. So that's in the documentation. We try to, on the security test, you can see that we also integrate Bash script, Go script, so different on upstream tests such as Kubuntu and so on. So this documentation is obviously improvable, but do not hesitate to make comments if you have any questions. It's an open documentation. It's hosted in the integration repo, and if it's not clear, just contact us on Slack or share your concern on that. But we try to do that for you. So yeah, so that was I was showing directly. So I will go. Just before we start, to precise that we have really two ways to run the test on ONAP. If we consider ONAP as a system under test, we have the first method, which is considering running the test outside of ONAP. So ONAP is a Kubernetes namespace, and we will run the test from outside. So we will start Docker that will speak with ONAP using the open API. So that's really the best way, because it's something done from the externally from ONAP. And what we are doing is we are building Docker where we collect different tests, usually based on the category, and we run the Docker through the system. And we integrate that after that in CI. So you can see that we have an additional step here, which is called cross-testing Docker. So it's just to indicate that the test developer can develop their test as they want. I mean, if you are able to run a test on ONAP, and if you want to put that in CI/CD, integration team will do the job to move that in integration cross-testing Docker, but the most difficult is to finalize the test here. So do your test if it's okay, and if you are able to run it on an ONAP system. So whatever you are using, it can be Postman, it can be curl, it can be whatever, because it's just usually a question of API plus the management of the state machine. Then just call us and we can include tests if needed. Cross-testing is just a simple Python library that is put inside a Docker, and this library is just providing an abstraction of what is the use case. As I said at the beginning, we may have different types of tests. Some are in Bash, some are in Go, some are written in robot frameworks, some are more or less complex. But so we may have different framework as input, and we have they produce different things. Cross-testing will just give an abstraction and saying, okay, we have different driver, but the use case is always the same. So we have a way to launch, and we have a way to report the results. But don't worry, it's a very simple, very small library. It's not a test, it's just an integration framework to help us to collect all the test case and to be able to run them to the system under test. So that's the first version. We are running the test from outside. So that's the target, and I think that's the best way to do because it's totally external to the system. We don't have any interaction. And we have also another way is to run the test inside the system under test. This one, if you are familiar with ONAP, you know it, because when you are running the health check from the controller, you are calling the robot pod, which is part of ONAP. Even if it's a test, it's part of ONAP, so it's internal to ONAP. So you can either use the pod, the robot pod, or start a job. So we see that and these tests are done internally. I know that the OM project asked us to try to remove them and to run them in the Kubernetes cluster, but in a different namespace. So it's not done yet, but it will be a way to keep ONAP as clean as possible. In ONAP namespace, we'll have only ONAP, and it means that the robot pod will be externalized and not part of the ONAP distribution. But That's a second way, and sometimes the advantage is when you are doing the test like that, you have access to much more API because you have access to all the entry point inside the cluster. But from an end-to-end perspective, it's not so clean because you need some admin rights. You need to be able to run a job inside the cluster you want to. But we have the two tests, and in the CI chain today, we have the two tests. If I come back to the beginning, here, all the infra tests are almost there. These four tests are done from the external. The health check score full else list are done from inside. The other one are done from the external system. And even for the smoke use case, 5G bulk PM and PNF registrate are done from inside the cluster. It's robot tests that are run from inside the cluster. Okay, so there are really these two types of tests, and now it's time for the demo. So I will connect to my daily Gulin, let's say. Okay, so I'm on here. I'm on ONAP, so I can see that all the pods are running. I will start with health check. So the legacy way to run an health check when you are on a controller, it's to go to the robot directory provided by OM, and you run this way. So you you run end to end. And what is happening is that this bash script is calling the robot pod and is running the test from inside the cluster, inside the robot pod. Okay. So that's the usual way to do that. Just to explain that we don't use this way in CI/CD. We use the job. I will just show later. But if you are familiar with the robot tests, lots of tests have been developed and can be launched using this way. You need just to know the tag, but that's not really what we are using in CI/CD today. Okay, just let it finish for the bit, and then let's move to the same, exactly the same test done, I would say, at the CI/CD, using the CI/CD way. Okay. Okay, so here we have, we are on Gulin, so we have OF that is failing due to expiration of a certificate. So that's the result I was expecting. Look, if I want to run them in a CI/CD way, I can show you. So it's a full test we want to run, okay? And in the documentation, we have a section, see the README in order to see how to run the test on your system. So it will be exactly the same test that has been run here, but it will be run through a job. So we explain here the job that we will run. Okay, we will call an image that integration team is building called healthcheck. So that's a Docker image which include all what we need in order to run the healthcheck test. So that's the test we have in integration, in test case. So we create a self-sufficient Docker with all the libraries that we need. And then we have some variable that are used for the CI. So what kind of installer we use, on which scenario, what is the name of the lab where we execute this test, and where should I put the results. If I put the result, we have also an indicator for the build tag. And the last one, which is very important, is the tag. So the tag is inside the health check. Which tag will I run? When I run the command here, I use the tag else. So if I use the tag full or core, I have to precise it in the job. So it's here. I will run that. And then we have, so like in the pod robot pod has a config map. We also need this configuration file, so that's why we have this config map. Okay, so let's show get jobs as it was. Oh, sorry, as it was installed during the night. We have lots of jobs. So we'll destroy it. So I will destroy the full job. So up. Okay. So it's destroyed. You can see. And the job. So when I do in CI, I automatically generate all the jobs. So you can see that the healthcheck full job that I was showing in the documentation is also available here. So we use the Gillen version of the Nexus image, and we run. So in order to run a job, kubectl apply healthcheck full. Okay, so the job is created. Okay, it's creating a job, so it would create automatically a pod. So compared to the pod, the robot pod, here the pod will be only useful during the test. So you can see that it's creating here. So we don't need to have a pod running all the time to perform this test. We launch it only when we need it. Logs. So it will run the test exactly the same way we ran it before, but you can see that we have a sort of formal way with declaration of the different variables we use. So this part is really cross-testing. So that's why I say it's an abstraction to run test, and we will see in the two other tests that we will have exactly the same way, with the same display and the same results and the same way to manage a test. So here it will launch the robot suites, so exactly as it is, and we will have the result the same way. Okay, so you can see that the robot test has been run. So you'll find back all the robot traces, and at the end you have a result. Say, okay, the test full has been run. It lasts 52 seconds, and we can see that the test have been pushed to the DB because in the job. We mentioned that we want to push the results in the DB, and the DB is a public DB. It's a LF public DB. And if I look at the results, project results, if I look at the last results, so okay, there are lots of tests in the same time, so it was not the last one. There are results push all the time, so I need to precise case name equal full. But here you can see on the 10th of February at this date, coming from which lab, I can see that my result has been pushed in the database. So that has been saved somewhere else. So in order to create the dashboard, it's easy to collect the results. And everybody can push a result to the database. There is no issue with that. It's a public database. We just need to declare the lab from which the tests are coming. Test results are coming. So that's the first test. So that's the basic health check. So you can continue do it using directly robot with a bash script, or you can use it through a job. So, but at the end, that's the same thing. And for the moment, we just test, I would say, a basic test. So it's just the health check. So that's one of the tests. Is it okay for this one?
Yes, Morgan.
Okay.
It's look fine to me.
So we'll move to the cluster test. So now we want to run the ONAP K8S test. So we will use an image. So I was mentioning, so the infra health check image here. So we have a version for Gilling. We have a master version. So depending on the lab you are running test, you can select what kind of test you want. You have more things in master. You have more stabilized things in Gilling. If we want to run a Kubernetes test, so come back to here, you can see that we have as well an intra README test that will explain how to run the test. So I just need to read. So as I'm going to run a test dealing with infrastructure, I will have to provide some information through a volume to the Docker. So we have all the information here. I just want to do the Kubernetes test, so I don't want to do the Helm. So I think this command is enough. So let's do that. Okay, so I need to precise and to give the config file. So I will give it to the system. Here, if I want to show the results in res demo, the demo ATS. So the volume, I just write where I want to put the result in the host, and then where I have to go into the cross-testing Docker. So here you cannot guess via cross-testing results. It's also part of cross-testing. In cross-testing, all the results that are pushed here will be published into the artifact. So when you are running a test, usually we push the results in this directory, and automatically you can push that in a S3 bucket, or it's used also to be pushed in any backend you can have if you want to push the results. Okay, so I will run that. So I will use the Gullin versions. Okay, it's already there. And if I do not precise that, I will try to run everything, but I want just to run Kubernetes, this one. So I run this command, and you can see back that's run the same way, and then it will take some time. So what happens is create a Docker. Up. Up. Okay. All right. Okay, so my Docker is created since 29 seconds. So that's a Docker that is outside the cluster, Kubernetes cluster. And if I do Docker log, so I will see that, okay, it's running. So that's exactly the same log I have here when I start the Docker. So we'll wait, but it will finish, and we will see in the. So I mentioned that I want to see the result in demo, yes. So I'm on the host. So you will find back the log of cross-testing, so the container that is running the test, and the artifact also of Kubernetes status for the moment. Okay, it's not empty, but you can see that it's generating lots of HTML page. So it's not finished because it's already an audit of the cluster. But at the end, when it will be finished, we will have, I don't know how many files we have for a moment. If we do, sorry, well, we have, yeah, lots of files, but it's not finished, so it continues. Okay, just wait for the end, maybe it's processing the end. So just need to wait some minutes, and at the end, yeah, another pod. Sorry. Okay, and that's typically what you can see when we are running here, when you are doing the ONAP Kubernetes results. So all these HTML pages are the ones that are behind this page. Okay, and you have lots of pages because you have the main page, which is the index, and you have a page for each pod. So these use cases, you can see it's a snapshot of the system. So is it finished? No, it's not finished yet. Yeah, we have lots of HTML pages. So it's light pages, but at the end we have quite a lot of pages. What is interesting in this test, it gives you a snapshot of your ONAP solution. So we have a page with all the versions that are deployed. So the 183 pods with all the versions. So when you have a problem and you want to troubleshoot, the first thing is to provide this information, because we know that with the override of the configuration, you can mix the version of the pod. So here we know precisely what is inside your ONAP. And then we have information, as I say, on all the pod, service, job, deployment, stateful set, PVC, config map, secret, ingress. You can click on any of the pages, and you can click on any of the deployment, and you can see that what is the status. So that's not the one I'm running here. Maybe I can take the one from that should correspond. So it's the one from the daily Gulin. So it's this one. Up. Okay. Yeah, we have also see it was the same. Okay, so if I look at any deployment, so let's take something from data router ANI, for example. You can see the pod is running, and if you click another page, you have a description, you have information on the init container, so and you have information on the container himself. And if you click on the container, so you have also the volume, the event. If you click on the container, you will have access to the logs. So as I say, it's a snapshot. So it gives you the logs when you are doing the test. So and it works only if the project respect the best practice consisting in putting their log in stdout. If it's not the case, you will not see anything. But we have more and more projects that are respecting that. For example, here it's not very explicit, but at the end of the installation, that what kind of things we have. I'm pretty sure if we are considering the test I was doing now, so it's not after the installation, we'll have more logs. Okay, so it's interesting for troubleshooting and to start discussing, especially for OM. You will see if some jobs were not finished. You will see if some deployments are not correct. For example, the OF as health checks, we can have a look. So this one is running, but the job was in error. So you have all the events of the job here. And if you have the logs, you can see that that's what the project is putting in SDout. So it's not very useful, but we have a 400, which probably should correspond to the fact that OF is trying to call music for which the certificate is expired. But just to mention that it's relatively complete. So I think it's finished now. Okay, it's finished. So the test is failed. Okay, because it detects that two jobs were in error, 4 deployments were in error. So that's why it decided to put fail. So sometimes it's not fail. Here it's fail. So since we have this regression music, it's failing. If I go back in the past, so I think it's expired well, 1 week ago. So if we move back to the 20th, end of January, no, not better. Okay, here it was end of January. So here we have a full installation of ONAP with a cluster perfectly clean. But since we have this expiration, we have this error. And it happens also time to time that we have some issue with deployments that are a bit complex. So that's external deployment, but what's the name of this deployment that is failing? So that netconf or something, netbox is failing time to time. Okay, so that's for the Kubernetes test. Is it clear?
Morgan, can we take a look on the Python SDK test?
Yeah,
How those
that's
tests?
the next. That's the last one. So that's the next one.
Okay. Okay. Till now, it's okay to me.
Okay. So if there's no question on this one, so you can run the security test the same way. And now we'll deal with the Python SDK test. Okay, we'll try to run the basic VM. Okay. So for the basic VM, I will come back to the documentation. So basic VM, it's here. You have also a README if you want to know how to run it. So I think yeah, it's not right, because we have two two smoke tests. We have the Python SDK base and the robot base. So the README, we should read the README from the Python SDK. Okay, so as I said, Python SDK is Python SDK test that we call ONAP test. It's simpler. Is consuming ONAP SDK. ONAP SDK is a third-party library that you can find on PyPy. So you can install a pip install ONAP SDK, and then you will get a suite of functions that allows you to discuss directly with ONAP. So you can do everything with Python SDK directly. There are lots of documentation on that. If you want to see how to run, for example, the vfirewall macro, so we have some example. And here it's really like a script. So when we run the ONAP test, we create another repository that is consuming the Python SDK, just because most of the time we are doing the same thing from one test to another. If we want to deploy CNF or VNF, we need first to upload the model. So we need to create the VF, the VSP. So that's why we decided to create a side of this SDK, another project called Python SDK test. So if I go to GitHub ONAP, okay, Python SDK, because Python SDK, the SDK is really a SDK. It's just doing what the SDK is expecting to do. It does not, for example, create resources on the cloud. It will not do special reporting. It's just a pure SDK. So we needed something else in order to finalize the test and to have test scenario that we can replay. So we create this repository, and you can see that all the different tests are in scenario. So today we have basic CNF, basic network, basic onboard, basic VM, CDS blueprint enrichment, PNF macro. So we have different scenario. And if I look at basic VM, you will see that, of course, we are consuming Python SDK all the time. I will not detail all the architecture of Python SDK test. It's really like the Russian puppets, you know. For example, we want to do a basic, we want to do a volume instantiation. So this volume instantiation method we call a VNF instantiation method, that we call a service instantiation method, that we call a creation of a model, etc., etc. But I will just show how to run it. If you want to have additional details, you can contact us on Slack, or I made a presentation a few months ago on this architecture for the Python SDK test repo. But for us, it's simpler because it avoids duplicating the code. So if I want to run a test, first I will have a look at, I will do it manually. So I will first retrieve the IP of my cluster because I will need it. I can pass it as an option when I run the test, but I will do that. So I just save that. Okay. So if I look at the README, how to run a Python SDK test, how to run a basic VM test. So you have a command here. So you can see that we put all the hosts here. So I will not do that. I will do something simpler. So I will docker run. I need to precise some env variable, so I can show you the env variable file. So we find back, we find also what is the name of the installer, what's the DB, if it's a debug or not. And we have two additional information that are mandatory to run the test. Is the OS test cloud. If you are providing clouds.yaml to the test, you need to precise on which cloud you want to deploy your system. So that's just indicating that the VNF that I want to create in OpenStack will be in this cloud. And you have also which test I want to run, and then you have to precise the name of the settings you want to run. So here I want to run a basic VM, and I want to associate a basic VM setting file. So that's explained documentation here, but that's really needed to have these two environment files to be set. And I think you can find that if you go, where is it? Basic VM, no, yep. too many things. Okay, fine. Yeah, Python SDK test. There is also a README here. We could make some evolution probably in future because the name should be enough. But we have really the two export. We need to precise the cloud and the configuration. That's what will be used in order to select the test we want to run. So that's what you have in the on file. So if I do the Docker run, I will do it in the interactive mode, so you will be able to see on file. On I need so to precise still my OpenStack cloud. So I will provide the clouds.yaml, and I will put that in root config OpenStack clouds.yaml. Okay, and if I look at the doc, I will put the result temp res basic VM. So I use also varlib. Okay, I will. These things I will do manually. I don't need to overwrite. I can, of course, when I run the test, decide to overwrite some configuration. For example, for basic VM, when you create a VM, you will ask when you create the model what kind of flavor you want, what kind of image you want, etc., etc. So if on your OpenStack you do not have, for example, an Ubuntu 16, the test will fail because you will try to, the model will be okay, but when you will instantiate, it will not work. So you can still overwrite the settings files of the service by overwriting this file, and you can indicate the flavor, the image name you have in order to be more in line. Here, everything is fine. I don't have to do it because I know that on my OpenStack, I have already all the image I need. Okay, so I need to put the image. And I will do in interactive, so I will do in bash directly.
Morgan, hi,
Yeah.
Greg speaking. One remark from my side, because as you know, I was recently having fun with your tests, and actually I have noticed a small issue in the documentation where you define the volume with the clouds definition, the clouds.yaml file. In the documentation, there is said that the path is root.config and openstack.yaml. It's wrong. You have to correct
that's
it.
right.
I lost some time because of it.
Okay, sorry. But when you see these kind of things, do not hesitate to create a patch and fix it, because that's true. You know, I'm used to that, so I even didn't check. I copy the right one, and that's true. That's not correct. Okay.
Well, I'm used to the old path, but I saw the documentation and I thought maybe something changed then.
No. Okay. Well, good point. But do not hesitate to create a small patch, and we will merge it very soon.
Okay,
but you're
thank
right.
you.
Yeah, sorry. And I know that I reviewed this documentation several times, but I'm probably too used to it, so I don't see this kind of big error. So
yeah, that's probably the case. Yeah, you know it by heart, and you don't even notice some minor issues.
yes, I'm in the Docker, so you can see that the on file that I put are available here. Okay, and the name of the cluster, the cloud is here. So everything is fine. If I run the test, then I will have a problem because I'm in a Docker out of the system, so he will not be able to. He has not the IP address, so I can do that to show you that it will not work. So that's the command to run basic VM. And it will not work because simply it will not be able to join the ONAP system. So here is okay. You can see broken, lib. So if you look at the log, he tried to contact, but he say, okay, I'm not able to connect. So he's not able to connect the SDC, so he's not able to work. So I will indicate this in the etc host of the file here. So that's what I copy. So obviously in our CI/CD, we automatically add it with this parameter, but now we can do that this way. So here I will rerun the test, assuming that now we are able to connect to the external system. So it may take some time. So we are first trying to run to publish the model. So if the model is already published, we don't try to, we just consider that it's already there. So we'll try to instantiate based on the existing already published model. So that's why it was relatively fast here. You can see that the first log, so it's very verbose, but we check that the thing was existing. So here we are some binary in the log, so that's not very interesting. But so there are some improvement also in Python SDK to improve and to avoid printing things like that. But okay, I will show you. Here we are no more in demo Kubernetes, but in demo, what's the name? Res base VM. Okay, so same, we have the cross testing log. So go. Okay. Okay, so here we don't have the Python SDK yet, but it will come. Okay. So here we can see that we move forward. We are at the instantiation level, so we should see the request to the SO. We try a la carte instantiation based on the model we just checked that was imported. So we have the request here. Okay, and then it will do the usual way. It will first ask for the creation of the service, then for the VNF, and then for the module. At the moment, we are at the service level, I think. So the idea request. No, we are VF module. Okay. Okay, so I can OpenStack OS. I don't know by heart.
Morgan,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt. I didn't get the part where you are putting the data. I mean, say you need to update the data files and all. So that in that scenario, how and what are the files that we need to update?
So sorry, I didn't catch the beginning. What kind of file you are mentioning?
Yeah, I was saying like say you are running one scenario creating VM for your test cases. Say
Yep.
for me, if I want to do a check for my VM and for my VNF. So in that scenario, how and what are the files that I need to update?
You mean if you want to create your own test with your own image and not using the basic test we are using?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So,
yes, yeah.
Okay, so well, I think it should be relatively similar. Here we are just, so okay, I can show you that. So that's in Python SDK. Python SDK, where is it? Too many. Come back. Let me show you that. GitHub.com. GitHub. ONAP. So you can either use directly the SDK, only the SDK. If you want to use Python ONAP test, then I will show you how we do that. So Python SDK. Because that's true, we use an Ubuntu VM, but we can use any type of VM, any type of module. So usually, we have what we call template here. So the VNF descriptions is a VNF service. And if we look, for example, let's say here that's a Clearwater things we want to run. So the parameter you have to precise is the name of the VNF you want to use. And what is important is the head file you will bring to the SDC. So
sorry, Morgan, again, your right screen is not visible very much.
So,
but it's quite, yeah, it's good now.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, so that's in the template VNF services. Then I create a YAML file, which is the description here of the VNF service I want to create. And inside this, I can create several VNF. So if I use, for example, for vFirewall, I can have several. In Clearwater, there was only one big VNF. So I only need one, but I can have a complex VNF if I need. And what is important is I need to precise the head file I will use to create the model in the SDC. So if you have, if your VNF is already compatible with ONAP, if you did everything through VPP and that you can run it, then you just need to precise in here, so you can precise whatever path you want, but you need to precise the zip file you want. And then in this zip file, you will have so I can show that also. Up, that's in ONAP, Python SDK, source, ONAP test, template. So we have a section it file, and we have, for example, Ubuntu 20 that we use for and in Ubuntu 20 agent, you will find the AMP file and the YAML file that are the file that you need to declare your system. So that's typically what is used when you onboard a system in ONAP, but you need just to zip it and give the link to this zip in your service description. After, you can precise some parameters, so that's the parameter you want to overwrite when you are doing the SDNC work. Okay, when you are that's typically what you can overwrite as part of your module. So just for the instantiation. So this for the instantiation, if you have some difference in your environment compared to what is available in the model, so just to configure at startup. Once you have done that, you can, okay, usually what we do is we create up. I think we have that here. So we can run basic whatever here. So if you basic VM, and we can see that what we'll do is we will run basic VM with the environment file we precise. So everything in your test will be, well, assuming that you did the configuration, you have the zip and you precise the sample. In the configuration part here, you have the settings of your test, so basic my own VNF. So for example, if I use still Clearwater, and then you will precise where you go and find the entry point that will find the zip, that will find all the, and you precise additional information that you need to provide to an app when you create customer, cloud region, things like that. So to summarize, you need to have a zip file with all the it or the M chart ready for the onboarding. You need to create a file called a VNF service file here that will include the path to the zip file, and you need to create a configuration file to add additional parameter you need depending on the scenario you are using. But that's a complex scenario. If you use directly Python SDK, it's usually a little bit simpler because it's really like a script, and you don't have to take care of all this organization of files. But anyway, if you are using Python SDK, at the end you will do the same. You will upload your zip file, you know, here, for example. So you will upload the zip file and you will push that to the SDC. Okay? Okay, so we saw that the test is finished now. So we run into, so it was too short, but okay. So we create a basic VM and it generates reporting. So usually the reporting, that's something you can see. So let's see the last from today. No, okay. So bad luck, this one does not work. I will try to find the ones that work. I think today it was okay. 2021. Okay. Okay. So basic VM. At the end, the reporting should be like that. And you see this story of Puppet architecture. So we start from the bottom. When we start basic VM test, first we create a vendor, or at least we check that the vendor we declare in the configuration file exists. If it already exists, we just retrieve it from the SDC as an object, and we move to the second step. If it does not exist, we create it. So the first time we create it. Then we will upload onboard the VSP. Then we will onboard the VF. And finally, we will onboard the full service. So you can see that in the SDC, we spent about 200 seconds here. Then we have this mixed operations that are needed between the onboarding and before we instantiate is all the creation of complex and ANI objects that we create through the SDK. So one more time, that's the logic of the SDK. We check if what we are asking is existing. If it exists, we use it. If not, we create it. So we'll first see if the cloud region we want is already created and registered. If so, we move to the complex. If the complex exists, we move to the link between the cloud region and the complex. Then we create a customer, then we create a service subscription for the customer, and then we connect the subscription to the cloud region. So that's what is needed by the model of ONAP today, but that's done through the SDK automatically for you. And we were mentioning that what is that's part of the configuration file here we have. So we can declare our own object, or we can reuse one that exists. So it depends on what you want to do. But typically the cloud regions, the name of the cloud region. So that's ONAP information. That's not OpenStack. OpenStack informations are retrieved directly from the config of OpenStack that we are providing to the system. Okay, so then when we finish all this operation, we start doing the operation through the SO, and we ask for the creation of the service, then the VNF, and finally the VF module that is created in OpenStack. So that's why it takes more time, because this part is calling the SO adapter. And what we also, I didn't mention, but what is important to indicate is in this test, we delete the resource. So we wait 30 seconds that everything is fine. And when it's fine, we start deleting the resource. So that's why you don't see any more server, because we delete it at the end in order to keep the system as clean as possible. Okay. We can decide not to delete it. For example, if you want to deploy an OpenStack, but that's part of the configuration again. So if I go back through, so we can we have a cleanup flag here. If we put the cleanup flag to false, it will not clean the system. So it will stop at the end of the instantiation, and you will keep all your all your VNF up and running, and it will not try to clean it. But for the CI/CD, as we want to have a clean environment, we clean the system at the end of the test. Okay, so that was for basic VM. So that's a bit different. As I said, there are other basics coming. And if you have additional tests you want to integrate, of course, we'll be more than happy in integration to welcome new tests. You don't have to provide the test using Python SDK test. You can, if your test is running on your system under test, just tell us. And if you think it makes sense to stabilize the overall system and to include this test in the CI/CD, just tell us, and we will do the integration. We'll help you to do the integration for you. We don't need necessarily to use a given framework. You can use Robot, you can use Python, you can use Bash. If you look at, for example, a very simple script on security, I know that the guy from the security, to check that there's no OpenGD Java debug port open on the system, you can see that there is only one script, so it's a Bash script, and it's all the script is the only script for the test, so there is nothing else. So that's less than 100 lines of test. So don't feel committed to use any framework. What is important is the test. But of course, Python SDK is providing lots of abstraction, and you don't have to redo all the things. If you do that manually, and if you connect to the GUI, if you onboard models, you know that it's at the end it's always the same thing. It's a bit boring, so that's why we create this SDK in order to automate these kind of things and to be able to put this automation in our CI/CD. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share with you this morning. I would be very interested to get the feedback from people that are not so familiar with integration. So I know for Lukash or Michal, or you know quite well, or even Eli, but people are new. Is it clear, or is it totally obscure and not usable as it is? Because if it's obscure, I've got a problem.
I think Morgan, I mean, it was a good presentation from you, and we got too many informations. But I think we need to do a hands-on to check how things are working. So yeah.
Yeah, I encourage you to try. Yeah, Alex, you want to say something?
From my side, very valuable from what you have presented here. Sure, the daily work will be much harder when your very good presentation here. So for newbies, and I'm very happy to contribute something, and I have to find a way how to contribute existing test cases from our side.
Okay.
So I will come back to you. Explain how we are doing it actually and how we can integrate this new environment. But it's good to see that it is possible not to stick ONAP SDK or something from your framework. We can also bundle our robot scripts or something like that.
Yeah. And we integrate any kind of thing through the cross-testing abstraction, which is relatively simple. We can include what you need to know is to have a procedure to be able to run the test and to have a success criteria. So if it's robot, it's very simple because it gives you a criteria. If it's a bash script, you need to define your own criteria. But it's possible to integrate any kind of script, any kind of test, any kind of framework, basically. The idea is really to have, and it's good to have several ways to do that because we saw that we upgraded Python SDK beginning of this week. We moved from 7.3 to 7.4, and it broke things on the master chain. So we are happy to have also aside of this test, other tests that we can still use. Everything is not breaking at the same time when we are doing integrations. It's like in aeronautics, we need to have two systems to be sure that it's working fine. So I have no problem, for example, the PNF registration, so a test that have been defined by Christophe Kousmiki, is using a robot. They are also using the same way. They are doing almost the same things that we are doing in Python SDK. So onboarding a model, distributing and instantiating things. So, but that's done in other ways. So that's good to have diversity also on the test we have.
Okay, thank you from my side for your presentation. Thank you.
From my side, I think good. It's good that we have this documentation with all the information is placed in one place, right? Plus this recording. So if you could somehow attach this recording also to this documentation, maybe it will be helpful for others. I believe so. There are some problems, for instance, when you run the basic VM test, for instance, it requires a specific version of the OpenStack. You remember, Morgan, the issue that was on our side. So there is a minimum spike, I think. Perhaps most of the people have already latest OpenStack versions, but some teams don't have, like we don't. So it might be a problem to use this test on such environments.
Yeah, you're right. Probably we do not indicate because Pike is relatively old, but you're right. We need to indicate that. So we were used to, our lab was in Rocky. We upgraded in Victoria last week. So now we are in Victoria. But that's true that it was linked to so it's not linked to the Python SDK test, but really to the OpenStack SDK that we are using in the Python SDK test that were not compatible with older version. It was not able to retrieve the configuration of OpenStack. So it should be probably be indicated in the documentation that the minimum version is required. And the same, I think, for Kubernetes. And when you are doing basic CNF, if you are using a very old versions, the SDK we are using, the client, Kubernetes client is also not fully compatible with very old versions. So we need to indicate that. Okay, I take the point. Okay, any other comment?
Morgan,
yeah.
Bishwa, actually, I was looking for the BNF instantiation code, and I think the Open SDK will serve that purpose. Yeah, I think I have one query, like what are the dependency on OpenStack for BNF instantiation? Like what are the components that we need to deploy before running those test cases?
Maybe we can continue offline on this discussion. We can exchange by mail if you want, so we can see your precise example. basically, OpenStack will just provide the configuration of the OpenStack you want to deploy on it, but everything is done internally by the SO, so it's relatively transparent. We don't have in the SDK the creation of things. Of course, if you need to create specific, I would say, tenant or network, then you can do it in the test because the SO will not do it for you. But if you have already in place the tenant, the project you want, the network you need, and that is compatible with your model, then it's relatively transparent. But maybe we can continue offline, and you can just detail the use case you want to do, and we can try to do it together. And if you want, we can also open some lab and do the work together if you want. Okay. Okay, so if no other comment, I suggest to close. Just for information, there is a weekly meeting on integration every Wednesday, so it's at 2 p.m. Central European time. So of course you are all welcome if you want to join. We are discussing here about the test, we are discussing about the labs, we are discussing about all the things integration is involved in. So feel free also to join. If you have new test case, do not hesitate to suggest a demo during this weekly meeting. We are always more than happy to welcome a demo of new use cases. This afternoon, I think we have some, I don't remember exactly, but we have at least 3 demos. So there will be new things, new demos. So feel free to join. And if you have any question, we have the Slack. It's relatively active now. I think since we moved from Rocket to Slack, we have more interaction with new people, so it's a good thing. So you are also welcome, more than welcome to ask your question here. And if you detect some issue in the documentation, do not hesitate to create directly the patch. Our integration team is very friendly and benevolent, and we will be more than welcome to improve that, because at the end, it's easier, it's for the community, so the less error we'll have, the better for everybody for the adoption of these tools. And the more tests we will have in the CI, the more stable the solution will be. During the last DDF, we had several sections on stability. We know that we have still lots of work to do that. If we can start integrating stability tests as well as part of the CI/CD change, it will be fine. But there is no free lunch, there is no magic behind that. Will only what we are able to provide that will make the quality of the testing and the integration. So welcome if you want to join this afternoon. And if you have any other question, if you want to have another specific session, just contact me. And I wish you a very good day. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Morgan.
Thanks, Morgan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.